So, in May of this year, I made a video urging people to think carefully before they choose the IB, because in actuality, it makes getting into US universities much harder than, just doing APs, and for UK universities, it's harder than just doing A levels. And I still stand by a lot of the stuff I've said in that video, but I want to talk about something else today. I have 35 points in the IB, and I'm not that unhappy with it. It doesn't sound like a high score, but when you think about the fact that the IB is already meant for highly achieving students in the first place, a 35 isn't too bad a score because 30 is the average. And under a while, I was under this delusion I could get into a university like Rice or Vanderbilt or maybe even USC or something like that. Why? Because I thought 35 was good enough. I had the idea that Oxford and Cambridge required around 41 to 42 points on average to get in. So, if you go a few points below that, that's probably where a university like Rice would be, right? Like 38 points for Rice? No. Like Rice requires like 43 to 44 plus points nowadays for regular decision, maybe like 41 to 42 for early. That's actually how difficult it's become. Rice now has the same ACT average as Vanderbilt and higher than Stanford. Now, Stanford's average is taken down by athletes and legacies, but in any case, just no, okay? I talked to Trinity College from Connecticut a couple of weeks ago. They're not even in the top 100 of ranked universities in US News or something like that, and their average IB is 38. How does that happen? Well, if you look at how many more admissions there have been, how much the average ACT, average GPA, etc. has climbed for these universities in the past few years, then it makes sense, especially with the Common App making applying to a bunch of universities so much easier. But that's okay. In any case, I'm an American, and I am going to live in the US when I am older. So from what I've read online and heard from career advisors, it's not a great idea to go to a UK university if you plan to spend the rest of your life in the US. Because, well, even if it's only for your first job, that degree does matter. And, well, your employer doesn't look at rankings. They go off of their personal opinions of the school. And let's just say that US employers tend not to have the best opinions of many UK schools. And, in many cases, they just haven't even heard of them. I say this because this one girl asked me, if it's so hard to get into US universities, why don't you just go to a UK one? And if I cared about what, my Indian aunties or, my British peers at school cared about me, that would be nice. But I have to look to the future. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand. And the people I've talked to whom I really trust have told me regional prestige matters a lot. But why the US? Why am I heralding the US and talking about why I want to go and live and work in the US? The first is because it simply makes the most sense. The US has a very strong economy. People at my school like to make fun of Alabama and Mississippi. Now, what they don't get is that the people making fun of those states are usually from like Washington or California or New Jersey or New York or something like that. If you're from the UK and you're making fun of Alabama and Mississippi, I wouldn't do that because both of those states, despite being the poorest states in the US, are still richer than the UK. That's how filthy rich the US is. So please don't appropriate our humor because it doesn't make sense. And if you want to work in that industry, if you want to work in the US, you better go to an American school from what I read online because UK degrees are not even given a modicum of respect in many cases. Especially local schools. For example, if you want to work in NYC, it's actually good to go to a place nearby there like Rensselaer because they have a good opinion of that. The place I want to go to has some pretty good relations in Boston, even though I'd rather live in Washington because, West Coast, Best Coast. But my point is, go to a place near a tech hub, go to a place with local connections to small startups and companies. And then, they say beyond your first job, no one cares where you went to uni, but you better get a good first job. So there's this one kid at school who was predicted 45 points last year, and he's studying biomedical engineering in the honors college at Georgia Tech. And kids at school somehow acted as if this was the biggest tragedy because he didn't get into any Ivies or something like that. And I'm like, are you serious? He's going to Georgia Tech. that's ranked number 4 for engineering in the US. And I'm sorry, but MIT and Stanford and stuff like that, those places go beyond. And for some reason, like, everyone thinks UC Berkeley is like a really good school. Like, everyone I know like overrates it so much. He picked Tech over Berkeley. Thank God, best choice he ever made. And I was talking to him recently, and I told him about that, and he's like, if they feel bad for me, then, well, honestly, I feel even worse for anyone who thinks Georgia Tech is a bad school. He said it was like, then he talked about how people who go to Tech make more money than people who go to Oxford, and he's completely right. They make way more, but that's more of the a result of the nature of the U.S. economy. So I don't like to really go so much on that point because you have to compare it. But my point is, going to Tech for his undergrad, he can probably get into MIT or maybe Stanford or something like that for grad school, and he's going to be damn successful. So this brings me on to my other point, because, like I said, a big part of the reason why he settled, quote unquote, for a, again, quote unquote, lesser school in the U.S. as opposed to probably being able to get into Oxford, Imperial, Cambridge, St. Andrews, something like that, is because of the U.S. connections. People frequently ask me at school, how do I become an American? And all I can say is there's really 2 ways. The first is to go marry an American. That's basically your best bet. The second is to get a work visa, which, I'm sorry, is near impossible unless you're, and I mean like a really smart, like STEM guru. I mean like a engineer or like a computer scientist or software engineer or something like that. I'm sorry, but like an English degree or a history degree, the demand for it just isn't that high. I'm not saying that you're dumb if you do it or it's a bad degree or anything like that, but it's simply, the demand doesn't keep up. There's more than enough people in the US who are already studying that stuff. But aside from that, because that doesn't bother me, I have an American citizenship. I'm just flat out American. There's nothing else really to it for me to worry about. But people think otherwise usually. I've been told I am 0% ethnically American by this one person in my class. Right, okay, I get it. I might not be white. But here's the thing. She has a South American citizenship. Where's she gonna go, the UK? I would rather be not white and be an American, being an Asian American, than like a white, like, borderline third world country or post-Brexit UK any day of the week. And I'm sorry if that doesn't sound nice, but neither does, telling someone that they're not a real American because of their race. But at the end of the day, that doesn't bother me, because at the end of the day, I'm in a good enough position. I have been to 15 countries, and I will still say the United States is probably the least racist one in the present day. There's lots of structural racism and problems like that, but the same stuff exists to an equal or even higher degree in many of the other countries. And where it doesn't, well, there's also present-day xenophobia that's very strong in those countries. I'm talking Scandinavia and Germany and stuff like that. I'm almost paranoid of visiting because, looking the way I do, I don't want to get confused for a refugee and like something like that. Like, just both socially and in terms of like my personal safety. It's a dumb reason, but it's a reason nevertheless. Now, there's this one university I've set my sights on, and they're not too high in the rankings. They get ranked lower because they're test optional, and that means that U.S. News puts them in a lower ranking. I was talking to a friend who's going to the University of Chicago, which is way better than Oxford and Cambridge in my personal book, and we'll see the results of that later on, I guess. But she was saying that ever since Chicago went test optional, actually it's being ranked lower by U.S. News, so they're doing other stuff to compensate. And that is what it is. I think it's a pretty stupid thing. And honestly, like I said, employers don't look at rankings, really. They look at their personal opinions of the school. But really, if you do the math on it, if Trinity College's average IB is a 38, and this one has a higher ACT average by 1 point, then their average is probably around 39 to 40 for the IB. And with a point like that, you could get into a top 10 university in the US. And this one is ranked more accurate. You could get into a top 10 university with 40 points in the UK, I bet. And this one's ranked like, 40th or something in the US. But, oh boy. Also, another thing, I don't like to look at that, but one of my friends is kind of confused because they gave out a flyer at school, and it has the average starting salary on it. And Okay, firstly, it doesn't look like that high a number, but for computer science, it's like 85,000, which I think is good enough. That doesn't mean that will be your salary or that will be my salary, but it does show the reputation that that university has with local companies. And the other thing I do know is that there's an anti-elite bias in tech. I was just reading about it the other day. Some companies in Boston, which I'm getting closer and closer to you being able to figure out what school this is, because if you know it's not MIT and it's a tech school in Massachusetts, there's like one other school it could be. But a lot of companies will prefer to hire people who didn't go to such higher ranking universities, but still have good grades, because they essentially believe those students are less arrogant and less overqualified. They might be less likely to ask for raises or want such a high level position in the company. And oh yeah, this one girl at school, when I told her that like Colorado was in the top 20 for computer science and that Georgia Tech was like top 5 for computer science, turns out I exaggerated. Apparently Colorado is not in the top 20 for computer science, but it's in the top 20 for virtually every other engineering field. Tech is only 8th for computer science, but it's in the top 5 for a lot of engineering fields, like number 2 for civil engineering and stuff like that. And she's like, oh, surely Ivies must be the best for computer science. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like Ivy Leagues, computer science, does that make any sense to you whatsoever? Because that's what they don't understand. They don't understand how someone who went to tech is more, I say tech, I mean Georgia Tech, not Virginia Tech. Speaking of which, this kid at school is doing his like presentation on the Virginia Tech shooting, which is kind of curious to me. But I'm getting off track here. My point is that like they don't understand how a kid who went to tech is probably more employable than a kid who went to like Dartmouth or like, I don't know, what's another Ivy that people forget about? UPenn. UPenn's a good school. It's a great school, but in terms of industry connections, I don't know if it has the same one like a huge school like Tech that's so engineering focused does. I mean, my dad turned down UPenn for Colorado, which I maintain was the wrong choice, because if he had actually attended to UPenn, then I would have been able to use Legacy, which people in my school think that Legacy is a myth and that like it doesn't really happen, which is just absurd because, well, I don't know. I've done talking about what people at school think because it's ridiculous. But yeah, I would have been able to use Legacy admissions to get myself into an Ivy. But in the process of not attending the Ivy and attending Colorado instead, truly, my dad actually did show me the reality of what a higher education, especially with tech-based fields, is actually like. And I'm forever thankful for that, because I haven't received that advice from anyone else. For ages, I was told to discard my interest in computer science because all the jobs would be outsourced, and in addition to that, it didn't pay well. Now I'm finding out that computer science is very hireable, likely not going to be outsourced, and pays better than virtually every form of engineering except for petroleum on average. So, not that I would select a career based on its salary, but my point was, why did I ever drop CS? It was the right choice for me. And I hope that from watching this video, you may have taken a thing from what I've said, even if you don't agree with me, and you definitely don't think I know any more than you do, because I probably don't. But that's just what's become apparent to me, and you probably have something different apparent to you. And if you do, I'd actually love to hear it. So let me know. Let me know.